also the network to leverage knowledge from experts, but also from employers directly, and as well as from peers such as like yourself. I guess to start off about what we're going to be talking about today are key interview skills. So can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. So we're talking about, I guess, key interview skills, and key interview skills aren't necessary, and key interview skills are really critical to understand what you need to understand. Sorry. It's really important for you to understand what skills you need to have at interview, because that essentially will give you the best opportunity for you to get a role. So if I were just to kind of move into slide 2. Sorry, how do I move into slide 2? Here we go. Sorry. So what we wanted to discuss with you today is just I guess a number of things. So what we wanted to discuss is how do you actually prepare for an interview. And preparing for an interview isn't necessarily just about preparing for the day that you are sitting an interview, but there's a number of things that you need to do before and after an interview that really give you the best opportunity to get a role. So that's what we'll be talking about. And we'll also be giving you some insights into some of the key tools that you could use to help structure some of your interviews in order for you to get the most out of them. So I'm just trying to go through the next page.
All right.
Okay, so I guess what are interviewers actually looking for? So from this slide, you can see that what interviewers are typically is for you to have the necessary skills and expertise to perform the job to a high standard. What that actually means, guys, is that what an interviewer is typically looking for is, can you do the job and can you do it well? And on top of that is the kind of the mentality of somebody that's looking to hire is typically they're looking for somebody to come on board, or they're looking for someone with the relevant skills that can demonstrate those particular skills in front of them, those particular competencies that will make them think, right, okay, if I bring this person on board, I've got a set very limited amount of time to actually help this person develop and help this person to actually do the role. So essentially they're looking for someone to come in and actually hit the ground running immediately. And when you're talking to, when you're having sort of these particular interviews, a great way of you to actually demonstrate your skills and expertise is through talking about experience. Now, that's all well and said when you're an experienced hire, but how do you actually do that as a young graduate where you may not actually have the employability skills, because it's a little bit harder to do that. But this is actually what some of the tools that we're going to be teaching you shortly will actually allow you to demonstrate some of your key skills, because a lot of the skills that employers seek, you actually possess, guys. You already have those skills in your bag and in your locker. But what some of the tools will allow you to do is they will allow you to translate some of your personal skills, whether it be as part of a sports team, as part of a project team at university, or just generally to actually translate those experiences into employability experiences that will resonate well at interview.
Yeah. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is how you should approach your interview. You should think of it as almost a 3-stage process. So you need to think about how you're going to behave and what you're going to show in an interview, but also what you should be doing before your interview and after your interview, because both before and after are very important for you to set the stage and set a true reflection of who you could be as an employee in that company. So do you have the right cultural fit? Do you have the soft skills? Communicate professionally? Do you follow up on the timelines that you've said you followed up? All of this kind of attributes to who you'll be like as an employee. So it's very important to think about how you can demonstrate that before your interview, during your interview, and after your interview as well. Can we go on the next slide, please?
Sure.
So these are some tips that we would like to share with you that are things to think about even before you get to the interview stage. The first thing I would say is you need to get into the mindset of an interviewer. And I know what it feels like when you're a graduate and you're going into job interviews, you feel like everyone is there to catch you out. But actually they're not. You know, when you're an interviewer and you've got to the stage where you're meeting someone face to face at an interview, you're looking for reasons to hire that person, and not reasons to catch them out, and look for reasons why they won't be the right fit. You're actually going there hoping that this person is going to be the right fit for your organization. And as the person being interviewed, you've got to that stage because you have the right skills, the right competencies, traits, and your hiring HR consultant thinks that you would be the right fit for the organization. So this is the point where you just have to demonstrate that you are that person, you align with the company's capabilities, and you have the right attitude and the potential for that role. So keep in mind next time that you go to an interview to go with confidence, because the person that's interviewing you is actually looking to hire you. They're not looking to trick you into not doing well in the interview. So take that with a little bit of solace and go in with more confidence. The other tip that we would say is be aware of applicant tracking systems. So applicant tracking systems are where your CVs and your application forms will go as the first stage of your application within a company. So you submit your CV, but you will be amongst 500-600 other students or graduates that have submitted CVs. Now, what these systems do is they look for keywords to bring up your CV to the top of the list. So if you want to make sure that you're going to be noticed and that your CV is going to go to the top of the list and it's going to be easier to filter and find for that hiring manager, you want to make sure that you are mirroring the keywords in the job description on your CV. So this higher your chances of being seen, and it higher your chances of actually getting to the interview stage. So for example, if the job description says that you need certain technical skills, or it says that you need leadership skills or soft skills, make sure that in your CV you put those keywords in there. So make sure you talk about experience that has those relevant skills so that your CV will match that job description. So these are some key tips to think about before you get to interview stage and before you go into your interview. Can we go on the next slide, please?
Sure.
So another thing that we wanted to highlight to you is that, first impressions really make a difference. So when you're an interviewer and you're meeting a candidate for the first time, typically in a matter of 1 or 2 minutes whether this candidate is the right fit for your organization. So some key things that sound very simple but important to remember are, firstly, before you get to your interview, confirm your attendance and arrive before time. Kenan and I always say that if you get there on time, you're actually late. So 15 minutes early is you really being on time. It gives you time to settle in, make an impression in the organization, have a conversation with someone who's there, and also just helps you be more relaxed and more confident when you finally get to that interview. So arrive early by at least 15 minutes, send an email the day before your interview, just confirming the time and the location so there isn't any confusion on that situation. And then attire is also very important. So this makes a huge difference on first impressions. Every organization has a different culture. You might be going and interviewing at a startup, which would be very casual for the most part. Or you might be interviewing at a big corporate that might be very formal and you have to dress in a suit. But it makes a difference if you go to an organization that considers themselves very formal and you're wearing jeans. That will make a bad impression on them. If you're going to an organization that dresses very casual and you're wearing a suit, they'll think that you're not the right cultural fit. So it's important to mirror the company's culture in the way that you look and how you're dressed, because you want to show them that you're going to blend into the company and you're going to fit in with their culture. And a way to do that is your attire. And then lastly, think about, what language you're going to use. So be clear in your answers, prepare your answers before, be articulate in explaining a certain situation. So if you have an example, think about how you would explain that in a way where someone wouldn't who's necessarily understood the background behind it would clearly understand what you're trying to show in that answer that you're giving. So just do a little bit of preparation before your interview on these key things, you know, how you're going to articulate your answers and your skills and the things that you want the interviewer to know about you, the attire, so how you're going to represent yourself and the company, and also just being on time, being prepared, showing your organization skills by being early and sending an email to confirm the day before.
Yeah, sorry, just to add to that. So thanks for that, Zee. That's really useful. Just to add to that, I think it's a really good practice to send an email the day before. By sending that email the day before, you're able to ask the question, for instance, can I just confirm what the attire is? It just gives you, you're able in that email the day before to ask any particular questions you may need to ask. So utilize that day before email, because it's also a really good way of demonstrating to the employer that you're highly engaged, you're somebody that is quite responsible, that you are a planner, because you're planning a day in advance by sending that email through. From a business attire perspective, absolutely spot on. Through your research of the organization, you'll be able to understand what is the culture, and that will obviously determine what that business attire might be. So as long as you are doing the research around the business, you should have an idea around what the attire. If you are still unsure because of whatever level of role that you might be going into, send a note through just as a confirmation. It's a really good way of checking in and building a rapport with the potential employer, but it's also a really good way of you getting the relevant answers. Don't be shy about sending that note through. And on the final note around speech, what's really important, guys, is tone of voice. A lot of, I guess anybody that's going into an interview environment might feel somewhat a little bit apprehensive, might feel a little bit nervous. But your tone of voice, the way that you project your voice, is really, really critical. You know, having that first impression, that first smile, that first, you know, you putting out your hand for a handshake, maybe not so much in today's age of Corona, but it could be a fist bump in today's market. But just being able to be that confident from the start really helps set the way. So ensure that your tone of voice is certainly there, that when you're answering questions, you're not being monotone, that you are able to hit different frequencies with your voice. Because if somebody's just talking to you in a very dreary way, it can be somewhat, you know, as somebody who's hiring somebody, they can turn off a little bit. So just make sure that your tone of voice is definitely there, that you are able to project a little bit more. That's fine. So moving on to, I guess, what is a competency? So from this slide here, you can see that a competency is a highly regarded skill, attitude, or qualification that a company looks for in a candidate. So some examples down there of time management skills, accountability, analytical skills, and things of that nature. Now, what's really important, guys, is to understand that every organization has its own competencies. It has its own requirements for a role. Each role has a different set of competencies. So analytical skills might be something that would be really valuable if you're going into, say, an accounting firm or a financial services firm. But communication skills or time management skills, which are typically quite useful anywhere, but communication skills might be more important if you're working within you know, a technology business where you're having to work in groups of teams. So what you'll find is that in each of the organizations that you'll go into, there will be a different set of competencies that they will typically look for. And these are your typical skills that they really stand out. What's really important for you to understand is that you need to understand what are the key competencies for your chosen employer. So could you go into the next slide, please?
Sure.
So what you'll find here are some of the most wanted competencies or key skills. So from organizational planning to problem solving, self-management, teamwork, business awareness, numeracy skills, communication, and literacy. And I guess what's becoming a lot more important and more prevalent in today's market are things like entrepreneurial skills, where